Well, thank you to everybody for coming out tonight. Seriously, I know it's a weeknight here, and we really appreciate seeing not only a whole lot of familiar faces in the room tonight, but equally as many new faces. We're really excited to have this here tonight. This has been a couple months in the making, and a huge shout out to everybody that's gone into putting this together on our team. It's definitely been a village effort. So again, really want to thank you guys for coming out. We're here tonight to talk about what we're going to call our digital marketing brief. And I'll go into what that means in a second, but I know there's some folks in the room that are familiar with us at RDW Group, and there are some that might not be. So before I get into actually what we're going to be talking about tonight, I do just want to talk a little bit about the event itself and who we are. So first and foremost, to my left here, your right, is our awesome panelists and my colleagues. And I want to turn the spotlight over to them for a second to introduce each one of them because they're going to be giving us all the great answers here tonight. So I was going to go in order on the slide, but Caitlin, why don't we just go down the table and start with you?
Hi everyone, I'm Caitlin Delaney. I am the manager of social media here at RDW Group, so I am very involved in all the aspects we do on behalf of our clients for the organic and paid social media strategy.
Hey everybody, Dave Varhol. I'm the manager of search and analytics at RDW Group, and I manage our search engine marketing efforts as well as our client reporting efforts and trying to keep on top of all the changes and trends with Google and Google Analytics.
And I'm Stephanie Nadamlinsky. I'm an account executive here at RDW Group, kind of like a project manager, keeping everybody together, corralling all of our teams and just making sure we're giving the client everything that they want.
And all three of them are being extremely modest. It's very hard to sum up what each one of them do in a couple of sentences, and they truly do keep a lot of what we're going to be talking about today running like a well-oiled machine. I am Ryan Mackesy. I'm the Director of Digital Services here at RDW Group, and I'm going to be moderating tonight's panel with these fine folks. So thank you all for coming out tonight. So a little bit about RDW Group for those of you guys that aren't familiar with us. We are a full-service marketing and advertising agency. We have done a little bit of everything for a lot of years, 37 plus years in fact, in supporting brands, both local, regional, and national, to tell brand stories and get their messages out there in effective ways. Full service is not bolded by accident. That is one of the most important things on here. We are here to obviously talk about a very specific set of offerings today and a very specific set of tactics, but none of these things operate in a silo, and we really do like to consider that with all of our client projects. So we work with everything from strategy to execution and then measuring the success at the end, which is obviously one of the most important parts. And we are a large team. We've got a good chunk of them in here today, and a good chunk of them are all over the country, actually. So we've got 70 marketing professionals, and we're continuing to grow across a variety of different service areas, many of which are very closely tied to a lot of the digital tactics that we're going to be talking about here today. So again, a little bit here about what we do. I also struggled to get this all on one slide, so I'm not going to go through this line by line. But like I said, there are a lot of parts that go into a strategic communication strategy or plan. A lot of you folks in the room may actually know this already or may have gone through this process, but when you come to an agency or when you come to your internal marketing team with a set of problems or with a set of needs, we're going to approach it from multiple different ways. And there's just a swath of things that can be considered in these tactical spreads. Everything from actually developing your brand further through creative concepting and messaging, to marketing and buying paid media to get that brand out there. A big part of that also can revolve around PR and community building. And then there's the other part of that as well that is more interactive, where your website components and the measurement of the success with performance metrics. So there's a whole bunch here that we do and that we work with every day. But obviously, we are here today to talk about one in particular and how it relates to the rest. Digital marketing strategy and execution. That is obviously something that comes up very frequently in any of these conversations surrounding any of these other tactics right now. So we're happy to be able to spend some time with you guys today to talk through our digital marketing brief. We're going to play off the word brief in a couple of ways here tonight. Brief in that I only have you guys captive here for about 50 minutes after this, and they have yet to let us do sleepovers here. So this is going to be a brief period of time. Brief also in that we're going to approach going through some best practices in a very similar way to what we would do with some of our clients and prospects. We're going to take this from the approach of discussing needs, discussing goals, and discussing problems, and then prescribing digital solutions to that to help reach that goal. So I'm going to start this with a statement that seems very counterintuitive to a guy that values his job title. There is no digital marketing. Now hear me out for a second on this one. There is no digital marketing because digital is marketing. Not only just in 2024, but even back in 2014, digital is just a part of the integrated marketing mix now. If you are doing anything on any other marketing tactic or channel, and you're not considering how that may or may not interact with digital, even if you're not actively doing it at that time, you may be missing critical opportunities to get your brand out there in a successful way. So when I say that there is no digital marketing, I mean that you really should be considering digital with any marketing strategy, regardless of where you start. So I tried to break this down into a bit of a simple graphic here. Obviously, we know there are many, many spokes to digital marketing. If I did try and put all of these on one slide, this would look like an aerial view of the Los Angeles highway system. So we're going to keep it relatively simple today. A couple of pillars that we want to break this down to that we're going to walk through today in our questions revolves around organic content, which is anything that you're publishing out there through places like social media, through content publishing, blogs. Paid content, which is any kind of paid advertisement or paid boosting of that kind of organic content. And the other part of it, which is no error that this is looping around everything up here, is analytics. And that is something that measures the success of everything that you're doing, no matter what the tactic is. Now, digital is always evolving, of course, in multiple ways. Just a few of those that are going to come up today in our conversations revolves around tracking technologies, the way that we're able to prove success and how we're able to track your campaigns over the course of their lifespan is changing, and very rapidly this year in particular. Content practices are also always evolving. I feel like it was just a couple of years ago that vertical video was something to be made fun of on social media, but now it's something that's actively sought out on certain platforms. And then new technology, of course. We've all heard the buzz about AI. We've all heard the buzz about different types of technologies that are helping augment what we do in the digital marketing space. So this really affects everything that we're going to be talking about today as well, and is always changing, honestly, month by month. If I had made this deck a month ago, I would have had to change it this morning. So back to the stars of the show here. I'm going to dive into now the panel discussion portion with our crew over here. For the second that we're going to be going through this, I'm going to change my roles. My name is no longer Ryan Mackesy of RDW Group. My name is going to be Mr. Ryan Moneybags of the District Hall Savings Bank. This is our fictional bank that I am going to be heading up today, and I'm going to be serving as the head of their marketing team, and I've got some problems. I've got some challenges that I want to work through with our team here today. A couple of challenges that I have that I'd like our panelists help with is I'm a small team. It's really just me and one other person. There's a lot of things I know I need to be doing, but I need to prioritize what to do and in what order to do it in. Next, I have tried paid social and paid search, but I'm not really sure how successful it's been. I'm not sure I'm measuring it correctly, and I'm not sure that I might be targeting it correctly, so I really am not sure where to go for that next. Also, my bank has a suite of products to promote this year, much like many of your businesses might, and I really feel like people don't have an understanding of who we are or what we do, which is a serious problem for the visibility of then those products that we want you to know about. Other big problem with us being discoverable is that competitors are outranking us on search, very badly in some cases. We're not showing up for where we need to show up on topics, and we're not even really showing up for our own brand keywords, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And frankly, I know that I need to be doing content. I know I need to be putting out educational pieces on what we do and what we offer, but I have no idea where to start. There's so many places that we can start on this front, and I need some help there. Also, most importantly, and probably should be first on this list, is that I need to quantify this success to my leadership team. They're asking at the end of all these marketing cycles for my next year's budget, what did you do? Was this successful, and how did you measure it? And I'm not really sure that I'm measuring that the most effectively right now, and I could really use some help on it. So despite the fact that these challenges today and this bank that I'm speaking them to are made up, bank, these challenges are very real, and there's a very real shot that some of you in this room might be having similar conversations with your team. So I do want to work through these with our team here today and pick our experts' brains, with me sitting in as my role as the fictitious prospect here. And we're going to go down the line and see how we can tackle some of these problems from a problem to solution standpoint. So I am going to get out from behind this podium, and I'm going to go be more social over here and sit in this awesome chair. So thank you guys for being willing to meet with me today and take care of some of my marketing problems. I've got a couple of questions for you, and I'm going to dive in with a really broad one first. Content development is super daunting. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways that I can start to do this. How do I figure out where to start? How do I prioritize?
It's a great question, Mr. Moneybags, and I know the content marketing, when you talk about content marketing, there's a lot of things that go into it, and you can go a lot of different places. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of resources for you to actually build all that content, so you want to make sure you're doing it strategically. One of the things that you want to focus on here for content marketing is SEO. The worst thing that could happen is you're creating content for your website or a blog, you look at the analytics, and you're not getting any traffic. So you want to make sure you're doing all of your efforts for a purpose and you're getting traffic and people that are searching for your articles or topics. You want to make sure there's volume associated with it. So one of the biggest shifts we've seen recently in the SEO world is this shift from a keyword-focused model to a topic-focused model. And what that means is you really want to start to take a step back and think about what are your core service offerings if you're a service-based business, or if you're a product-based business, what are your core kind of products or services? And you want to own whatever that topic may be. So in your case of the bank, a high-yield savings account could be a product that you really want to see more account openings for. So you want to be the in Google's mind, you want to be the category leader for that kind of topic. And one way you can do that is with the use of a topic cluster. This is kind of a hub and spoke method where you see the middle section here is kind of called a pillar page. So this is a page that would live on your website that would cover a broad topic area. In this case, a high yield savings account. And then the cluster pages would be blogs or different pages on your website that would support that main topic. These would be offshoots, whether it is an FAQ article or questions that people are asking about that topic. You can break out into a separate blog page and talk about it more in depth. A successful topic cluster would answer all the questions around that main topic area. So doing keyword research is still super important. It's not that it's not important anymore. It's just that you really want to shift focus towards owning whatever that main topic area is. And start small too. Don't feel like you have to own every single one of these topics. Start small, and in this case, think about one of your service offerings. Build out the content around it, because again, it is going to take time, and see how it works. And then duplicate that strategy for all of your other services or products that you offer. And then the last thing I wanted to point out on this is the links is super important too. So you have in the central kind of part of the wheel, you have your pillar page. On the outside, you have your clusters, and you want all that content to link back and forth internally. And that just shows Google that it's just a better way for Google to be able to crawl your different pages to make your site more crawlable, and in turn will get you to the top of the rankings.
And that's really digital specific, and obviously we are doing a digital marketing brief here, but me in my role, I would be remiss not to be the pest that really pushes us beyond just digital marketing. And this is really website specific too. So we need to make sure that whatever we're doing here, however we're messaging ourselves or talking about ourselves, really expands just beyond our website or even digital marketing in general. But all of our outreach and all of our touch points that we're reaching people on are having that cohesive message and setting that same story. We also talked about keywords and topic clusters and how people are searching for us. We can get really in the weeds on that, and if we see certain search patterns and that doesn't align with how we want to talk about our brand, we can't change who we are and who we want to reach just because we're seeing those kinds of search patterns. So we need to kind of strike a balance between the two. What are people looking for, and the people that we want to reach, what are they searching for, and then how do we want to talk about ourselves, and can those align so we're getting the most qualified leads as possible. And a good example of this is we talk with some of our clients, especially in the healthcare industry, there's certain keywords and certain ways we want to speak about things. We talk aging adults, older adults. We don't want to use the word elderly. We certainly don't want to say, grandparents or grandmas. That's not what we're going to write on our website or in any of our messaging. But if you're going on Google and you're looking up, a place to send your grandma if you want her to be in a home, you're not going to search for homes for aging adults. You're going to search for what's a great place to send my grandma. And we need to strike a balance somewhere in the middle so we're really reaching the people that we want to, and they're getting the right information from us.
That's an important point about communication between tactics on this too, because you want to make sure that you're communicating that same message. Like if I'm saying that our high yield checking account is providing X, Y, and Z benefits, our billboard needs to be saying the same thing, but not just that, our sales team needs to be saying the same thing out there as well too. So message alignment seems to be a big priority for this topic cluster strategy. All right, well, I have another question now. Long form content is great and good. I like to talk and write a lot. But what other types of digital content should I be considering to get our name out there?
Your social media platforms are a really key part of any content strategy, especially as users nowadays are using them even more so as a type of search engine in and of themselves. So they're using it to search, but also to discover and shop and learn. How-to keywords are some of the most searched on TikTok nowadays. That doesn't mean that you necessarily need to be on TikTok, but looking at the platforms that you are on, it's important to optimize them and make sure that you're using those consistent naming conventions, those consistent visuals. Folks who are arriving there know this is your official brand page. It's not just a page that someone sprung up impersonating you. And you also need to make sure that you're including any of those topics and those keywords in your posts themselves. So how they'll appear in the platform search engines, but also in the Google search engines, because your social posts can appear there. This includes things like making sure that you're embedding any captions in your videos, because those will autoplay and mute on social media. And also you want to make sure that they're accessible for users of all different abilities and who might be differently abled. We want to make sure that we're not excluding anybody and that everybody can get our full message here. And collaborating is good as well. We're not saying you need to necessarily hitch your boat to one of the Kardashians and go the mega influencer route. But if you're already having those types of collaborations in real life, if you're a university and you have multiple schools within your university collaborating on a new degree program, or your bank is working with local community organizations, making sure that you're tagging those pages and working together when and where you can help be a little bit extra juice to help you go further. So it's good to think of those social media tags as almost a little backlink, but on social media.
Yep. And so does that impact my overall SEO strategy that I might be implementing with, say, my topic clusters?
Yes, social media can really help SEO, and it helps not only with your brand awareness, so you're getting your brand out there more. In turn, you're going to increase your web traffic. So that organic web traffic is going to increase, and also your backlinks too. So these are backlinks are basically like votes of trust. Other sites out there who are linking back to your website. This is a ranking factor for Google SEO, and the more backlinks you have, the more high quality backlinks you have, especially from social media platforms, the better. Free tip on SEO in terms of social media. One of the easiest things you can do right now to increase your SEO on social is to just make sure your name, address, phone is consistent across all your platforms. Something as silly as like ST period versus the name street spelled out. Google wants everything to be very consistent, so just making sure that that's consistent across the board between all your platforms and online directories will really go a long way.
Now, do I have to talk about the same thing in my long form content as I do in my social media content?
Not at all. On the social media side of things, it's all about creating value for your users. The algorithms are, of course, important. You want to be posting consistently enough that they know that you're there and you're a resource for folks. But those end users are the ones who are going to be engaging with your content and potentially taking that next step down the line. So your stakeholders might want you to be posting product posts and service posts, and those are, of course, super valuable to your strategy. But it's important to take time to put yourself in your user's shoes and think about how they're going to want to engage, how you can make that information digestible to them. Most folks are accessing social media via mobile devices and tablets. Some of you, if you're fellow social media managers like me, are probably on the desktop as well, but most people are on those devices. So it's important to keep it native, make sure you're tailoring it to the platform specs. That includes taking it and kind of tailoring it a little bit differently from an Instagram to a LinkedIn, for instance. Those are different audiences. They should have a different spin on that message, even if it's the same information that's native to that platform. It also includes things like making sure if you're taking a TV spot, maybe you're tailoring it to be vertical, as Ryan had mentioned earlier, or making sure you're making it fit within the platform specs. You're not necessarily just taking your printed flyer from an event that you have and posting that directly to Instagram. And a big one that we see all the time is QR codes. So they had their big COVID comeback. Of course, as we all know, they were on menus, they were everywhere. But it's important to remember that those QR codes are designed to bring people online. So posting them to Instagram or to Facebook isn't necessarily the best use for them. Those folks a lot of times are already on their phone, so they can't necessarily scan their phone screen while they're scrolling. So making sure that you're sharing a link that's clickable where you can, or you're directing people to the link in your bio on Instagram, or using a little story sticker can be a more better user experience for folks there. And we do have some examples over here. Yeah, great, thank you. So this is the one for Big Blue Bug. If you're local, I'm sure you're familiar. If not, they are a pest control company. They have a giant termite that sits on the roof overlooking Route 95. And for them, we really tried to balance informative content, but also trends. So this is a great example of one of their informative posts here. It takes one of the blogs that already exists on their website and kind of repurposes it for Instagram. So this is a carousel format on Instagram. People can swipe through and to learn a little bit more about the topic before they click through to explore more. So we have our little first card here that has the tick on it, and then they'll scroll through and see tip 1, tip 2, tip 3, and so forth, before that last card kind of directs them to go to link in bio to either explore more of that blog or others and kind of get in touch with us. So we're there to help them if they need us. And then on the following slide here, thank you, we have some that lean a little bit more into trends. So they, in addition, of course, to being a pest control company, are a pretty beloved local icon here in Rhode Island. All of these posts here, these are all reels on Instagram, those vertical videos that we had talked about earlier. And their trends content sees a good chunk of their impressions usually. This helps to bring people to their page, but also those people tend to stick around and hear more from us, which is great to see. Not every trend, of course, will be a fit for your brand, so it's important to make sure that you talk to your internal team, you figure out where that line is and what's going to work for you. But when and where you can keep it relevant, it will really pay off. Our one here at the back to school poster, all the way on the side here, that, of course, is something that lots of families do when they send their kiddos off to school at the beginning of the year. They have their little poster boards. It has all the stats for the kid, who their teacher is, and all their fun facts. So we made one with Nibbles Woodaway here. All the facts about the termite up on the roof, and a couple of little fun, buggy information here as well to kind of capitalize on that trend. And it was actually shouted out on the radio as part of it too. So it had a couple of legs beyond social media.
And Caitlin really hit the nail on the head here, and you spoke to it a little bit, how we're not going to use the same piece of content on Instagram and LinkedIn. We're going to play to the platform, but it goes beyond that too. We're not going to put a social post up on a billboard or use it as print ad. We really need to play to the strengths of each of the platforms that we use. So on something like social media, you can have a little bit of content, some pictures, some text, and then the caption can really supplement it. But then on something like a billboard, it needs to be a lot more broad because we're just getting people while they're driving. Or in something like a print ad, we can get really in-depth, give as much information as possible, but all of those tactics are working together to say that same message and really drive home that same kind of a call to action or whatever we're asking people to do. We have an example here for Access Health Connecticut. It is Connecticut's health insurance exchange, and really each year what we're trying to do is get people to enroll in health coverage. So we use multi-channels here just to drive home that message, enroll in health coverage, but you'll see all of the different executions vary depending on the tactic that we're using. So we're overarching on billboard, and then we're getting really in-depth in print, and then a little bit in between on things like digital display banners and social. But again, they all look the same, so as we're hitting people at multiple touch points, they're understanding this is from Access Health, we're saying the same message, and at the end of the day, just having people trying to enroll. And on the flip side of that, Caitlin talked about Nibbles Woodaway and Big Blue Bug. So for Access Health, we're looking at the overall strategy, how everything works together. But for Big Blue Bug, Nibbles had some really organic buzz around him. And yeah, I didn't even realize.
Intentional pun.
Yeah. So he had a lot of buzz around him and got people talking about it. So we'll lean into that on things like social. Or we get some earned media on him when you do the lighting every year. People come and talk about it. And it's a good way to inform the social strategy out of something that came up organically. So really everything's working together.
And Steph, you mentioned that messaging match. I think that's super important too, even beyond the ad impression. So there's a ton of different ads here, but past the click, like if somebody clicks on one of these ads, you want the landing page wherever you're driving somebody to match that same message too. So if in that middle example there, if somebody's clicking on that ad, they want to find a plan, they want to learn more about that plan, you want to make that CTA button as visible as possible on the landing page just to make the overall experience better for that person. If you know that that's what you're trying to get out of the click, then you just want to make that as visible as possible on the landing page side too.
So Dave, is there anything that I should be mindful of in where I'm driving people with these ads about what my landing page says or what they can do on it?
Yeah, as I mentioned, you want to make sure that that message matches. You want to make sure the ad is relevant to the page that you're serving to. So using the high yield savings account example, you don't obviously want to send people to some kind of a checking account page. You want to make sure that message aligns throughout. There's also some other best practices in terms of a landing page. You want to make sure your call to action is at the top of the page, and then we'll get into the tracking a little bit later. But yeah, it's really, that messaging match is really key.
That makes sense. So you kind of already talked about it a little bit already, but let's pivot to the question that we all need to answer at the end of all these campaigns. And frankly, I should have asked you this question at the top of all of these. I need to be able to figure out if all of this is working. Measurement is obviously crucial to both showing success and for me being able to improve what we're doing throughout. But how do I do it? What are the most effective ways to measure the success of any of these types of campaigns?
You talk about success, and I think that a lot of times we equate that with maybe product sales or something as black and white as that. But at the beginning of any project, we really need to decide what are our goals and what do we want to get out of the campaign and this investment in marketing. And that could be, product sales, but do we have enough people, do we have enough eyeballs on us who know us that we can convert into engaging with us and buying our product? And if that's not the case, then maybe awareness is really our main goal. And that's going to inform our strategy and decide who we're going to talk to, when we're going to talk to them, what messaging we're going to give them, what platforms we're going to utilize, and that will inform everything that we go from there. And then once we have that all set in stone and us and the client are all on the same page, then we can put that measurement plan into place so we can track it, optimize as we go, and just make sure we have as effective and as successful as a campaign as we can.
Yeah, and the KPIs or your goals of the campaign, whenever you're talking about setting up your measurement plan for a campaign, they're going to be different for every client, right? So as Steph mentioned, if you're an e-commerce company, obviously sales will be important to you. In this banking example, maybe it's a new account signups for people who are, you want more high yield saving account signups. So if you go to the next slide, Ryan, this may sound a little cheesy, but one of the examples we use sometimes is to talk about SMART goals. And this is at a high level looking at something that is very specific. You want to define your goal, whether that is, say you want to have 300 new savings account opens within a year. You want it to be measurable, so you want that data to live somewhere, whether it's in your CRM system or your sales team has that data. Just pinpoint where you're going to get that data from. You want it also to be attainable. You want to set realistic goals for yourself and your team to make sure that everyone's best set up for success. If you only had 100 new accounts opened last year, then 300 might be a little bit of a lofty goal for you. So you want to just weigh the options there and make sure you're setting everyone up for success. Relevant, so you want your KPIs to be relevant for your business. Obviously, if you're not a sales company or selling a product, sales aren't going to be important for you. And time-based, you want to set a realistic time frame for when you can see these results. So again, using that same example, maybe it's you want 300 new account opens within a year's time frame. After that year ends, you reevaluate things, you see how you did, and you kind of work backwards towards that way. When you talk about defining specific KPIs for these goals, we kind of bucket things into two main categories: micro conversions and macro conversions and micro conversions. So macro conversions are going to be your revenue-based goals. So these are really your business goals that are important to your bottom line of your business. These can be anything from sales, new account opens in this example, enrollment for higher ed, whether you want new prospective students coming to your school, new subscribers, or maybe you're a service-based industry like Big Blue Bug, and you want leads, people coming into the door who want to sign on for your services. So micro conversions are the micro touch points, these lighter touch points that lead up to the macro conversions. And these can be things on your website like a newsletter sign up when somebody's signing up for your your company newsletter, or just simply viewing a product page or adding a product to the cart. It doesn't necessarily contribute to your bottom line, but it gets that person into the funnel, and it hopefully leads to a macro conversion further down the way. Go ahead, Steph.
I love macro, micro, and that's definitely touching on what I was talking about earlier. Is it awareness that we're trying to get after? Is it product sales? It's somewhere in between. And I think that macro conversions are what most people think about when they're trying to track success. And that's probably what your senior leadership would be asking you for. You know, how many people did we have sign up? But we have to understand those micro conversions too, because those all lead into the macros. So I think that just making sure we're all on the same page ahead of a campaign, and making sure that people who are deciding that we can invest in marketing are aware of what we're going to track the whole time and how they all play together is really important.
And setting up a framework like this will just allow you to better make actionable, more data-driven decisions, versus just kind of throwing a dart at the wall and seeing what works. Maybe you weren't tracking something and you have a gut feeling that it works. It's always better to base it on data rather than just a gut feeling. So it'll set you up for better success along the way.
Well, I know that's what I'm going to be asked for, is being able to show that what we did was working. But I guess the big part of this is really defining what working is. And that is going to depend on those goals from the sound of it, those key performance indicators, and how we stack up against them. So I've got these goals in mind. I've got my key performance indicators. What do I actually need to do to be able to measure these? Is there anything that I need to set up or any technology that I need to consider?
Yeah, on the technical side, there is a tool that we use very often, all the time, pretty much for every campaigning client that we use, Google Tag Manager. And this is a tool that basically acts as a go-between between your website and your ad platforms. It's basically a simple line of code that you put on your website. Your web developer, your IT team can help. It's a super simple way to get it onto your site. And it acts as kind of a go-between between your website, and it tells all these different ad platforms, whether it's Google Analytics, Google Ads, your social media pixel, Meta, LinkedIn, whatever social platforms you're running, what happened on your website. So it'll feed these platforms the conversion data based on the macro conversions and micro conversions that you end up setting for yourself. You can set up the tags and the triggers, and it just makes it a very easy place, kind of a one-stop shop for you to manage all your tags in one place. That way you don't have to bug your web developer every time you need to set up a new conversion for your site. It all lives in one clean, simple place. And there's tons of guides out there. I go on YouTube all the time just to learn about new features and everything. But don't let it seem daunting. It's not overly complicated, but there's tons of resources out there if you're ever curious too.
And Dave makes a good point. A lot of the social platforms give you a lot of great data on the organic and the paid side, but that only tells you what users are doing on the platforms themselves. And once they click through to your website, you kind of lose them on the social side of things. So that's where those pixels come in. Most of the platforms have some type of pixel or insight tag. They vary on what they call it, but they're all, at the end of the day, the same. That little piece of code that you stick in your Google Tag Manager that let you kind of track those conversions and those website events and attribute them back to your social media efforts.
So speaking of attribution, once I get this framework set up and I've got conversions identified, say I want to determine when people are clicking on downloading a certain white paper that we put out about financial planning, and then we're also obviously tracking leads coming in, people that are submitting those forms. This all needs to show somewhere, and this all needs to be corralled somewhere, right? When I ran ads for the bank years ago that I don't know whether or not they worked very well, I was using something that at the time was called Google Universal Analytics. I heard that Google now has a new analytics technology out there. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so recently GA4 has been all the buzz in the Google Analytics world. Universal Analytics, as Ryan mentioned, is the previous version of Google Analytics. It was sunset last year, so all of your universal properties, if you haven't touched your Google Analytics on your website, that property is no longer going to be collecting any data. The good news is that GA4, Google does automatically create a new GA4 property for you, so you don't really have to do much in terms of setting up a new property. You, of course, want to double check to make sure that the data is flowing in and out properly, but it did set up a new property for you, and really what's new with Google Analytics 4 is really this shift in privacy controls. So one of the big things going on right now is this focus to a more interactive web experience or control web experience. So there's a lot of features in GA4 like cookie list tracking. It doesn't rely on third-party cookies. Consent management, so it talks between, Google Analytics talks to your GDPR banner based on whatever somebody selects when they get to your website. If they block cookies, they won't be tracked in Google Analytics. And then the personalized ads too. So personalized ads kind of goes along with that cookie list tracking and that those privacy controls. People have the option to turn on and off personalized ads. They are on in Chrome by default, but you can also turn that off. So it plays nice with those new tools and the new features there. But one of the biggest features coming out of GA4 is that it automatically tracks some of those website events or conversions that had previously had to be manually set up in Universal. So you don't have to go in there and set up any code. It automatically tracks things like form submissions, scrolls, outbound clicks. If you have a search bar on your website, it'll track what people are searching in there. So it makes things a little bit easier, despite the interface kind of being completely different.
So that sounds like it would help me with not having to identify necessarily all of my micro and macro conversions before installing this on my website, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, it will set you up with a baseline for measurement, but of course, in your measurement planning process, you're going to identify some custom places that you want to track, and you'll have to set that up with Google Tag Manager.
So in Google Analytics itself, because it's obviously been a few years since I ran our last checking account campaign, I'm really going to leave here and be speaking in bank terminology for the rest of the night, despite as much as I might try to go back to marketing speak. What other kind of data can I pull from a standard Google Analytics setup that I might be able to use to show this kind of value to my leadership team?
Yeah, I'll say one of the biggest reports that we use a lot is the source report, just to see where your traffic is coming from. So that's a report that us and our team look at daily in our reports, and we really highlight, is just to show where your traffic's coming from, and then again how it's doing in terms of performance. So how is it converting? Are people coming from these channels and spending a lot of time? Are they bouncing off the website? But you can dig as deep as demographic data, regional data. You can go as deep as you want, but that's one of the key places that we typically spend most time in.
So obviously we're talking a lot about website metrics on here, which we're going to be looking at as our end destination, but we talked a lot about social media earlier too. Caitlin, how can I tell if my social ads are directing engaged users to my website?
That's a great question. On the social side of things, there's a couple of metrics that we typically look at for this. One of them being impressions will tell you, how many eyeballs you have on your ads. That's always good to see if you're reaching enough people, if you're getting your message out there. But two of the more important ones, I would say, are clicks, which show you, obviously, how many people are clicking on your ads or going to your website where they're intending to. And then click-through rate, so the rate at which that happens. If you have a strong click-through rate, that generally shows that people who are looking at your ad are engaged and they're going over to your website to take that next action.
That's awesome. That'll be helpful to show if I'm trying to pitch getting Kim Kardashian on for one of our checking account influencer programs next year. She said no, by the way. Well, I want to thank you guys for walking through some of my challenges today. I think I have a lot of good takeaways to take back to my leadership team. I sure hope so, because they let me out of work early today to come here and be with you guys. I am going to hop up here and try and summarize all this. Again, while the bank that I represent today is fake, and I am, again, Ryan from RDW Group, a lot of what we talked about today is, again, very real, and a lot of this is very universally applicable. So to summarize some of the things that we talked about, you really want to map out any kind of content strategy that you're doing. Don't just go in blind. Don't just do brand content talking about yourselves. Don't just do content geared towards SEO either. You want to make sure that you have a balance between content that describes who you are and content that describes who you are in a way that your audiences are looking for you. Also, we like to use this term probably way too much, but play nice in the sandbox. Make sure that you're considering all of your other marketing messages and tactics before you put in place any digital-focused strategy. You want to make sure that you're saying the same things on your billboards that you are on your social ads, and you want to make sure that any kind of messaging you have out there isn't conflicting with each other. Also, integrating with social. SEO is always talked about as a tactic that is just for your website. And yeah, largely that's where it lives, but it also has a lot of influencing factors that are off of your site. Social is a big one of those. Social is one of the bigger backlink drivers for SEO now. So make sure that you are integrating a content strategy on your social media, speaking to some of the keywords and topics that you want to try and rank higher for, linking back and forth from community partners, and making sure that you're linking to your own properties as well. You also want to make sure that you're designing specifically for your channels. Now, I will be the first one to admit that we have all done this in this room before, repurposing something that's made for one channel to another. I get it. You don't always have the time to do a custom video for TikTok. But wherever possible, you want to try and make sure that what you're putting out there is designed for the channel that it's going to be on. And that's not something as basic as just changing the aspect ratio to make it a vertical video. Different kinds of content and different kinds of videos are going to play better on places like TikTok or on Instagram Reels than they will on YouTube or another platform from your website. So you want to make sure that you're going in with an understanding of what kind of messaging and what kind of content performs well on those platforms before you spend any of that time that I know none of you have to bust those out into your different content platforms. And then from there, and really again at the top, although we always put this at the bottom, make sure that you set your measurement plan and clearly define your goals. You don't want to be in a position where in a couple of months down the line, you've kind of thrown a bunch of things to see what stick, but they're not all gearing towards the same goals. It's good to try things. It's good to A/B test, and it's good to try out new platforms. But you don't need to be everywhere at once. In fact, I'd wager that there's really nobody that needs to be everywhere. You want to make sure that you're setting your goals to key performance indicators. Those are those metrics that can prove your goals. And that you understand the platforms and networks that you're putting these messages out on. For example, I probably wouldn't put a video of my cat on LinkedIn, although these days LinkedIn's been getting a little bit weirder. But on LinkedIn, you probably want more professional content, right? So if you're a B2B business or if you're somebody that's trying to work out more B2B content, that would be a place that you would probably set up some KPIs and content plans for. But make sure that this is clearly defined at the top and not just with you as the marketer, with the rest of your team as well. Because this is all tracking back towards those business goals at the end of the day, so you want to make sure that you get buy-in from all of your internal stakeholders as well. There are obviously a lot more things that we could talk about here, and I would love to do a 3-hour session on these. But this is some of the big highlights that we wanted to touch on today as what we've seen be some of the most talked about conversations that we've had in digital this year. That being said, there's still plenty of conversations to be had, the most important of which is with all of you here tonight. So we wanted to take a little bit of time, and by a little bit I mean we saved a portion here, to have an open Q&A with you all for coming out here tonight. This does not have to be necessarily to anything that we talked about on these slides. I would love to have you guys ask us and our panel experts anything that you might have, questions on digital marketing or any strategies that you may be having difficulties on, and we will, to the best of our ability, give you a good answer. So Phil is going to have a mic here. If you guys want to ask a question, just raise your hands up. He'll go over and get a mic to you, and you can go ahead and grill me and my colleagues here and see if we can't help you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Vivek. I'm a tourist here, by the way. I live in India, if you can't tell already. But yeah. So I've been in branding and marketing for the past 11 years as well. So, here to kind of network and probably look at collaborating opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. So that's pretty much why I'm here. Yep. So just coming from one of the perspectives that I have, and I'd love to know if you guys have an answer. So I see lots of agencies in the Philippines, in lots of other countries as well, including Thailand, which have taken over a lot of our market, and now SEO hacking or content-driven marketing and content bombardment are the key things that are happening right now, just to grab the kind of viewership and grab the kind of attention that we probably want for our clients as well. And this has kind of really challenged the entire market and challenged the value proposition that we can bring for a whole host of our clients as well, especially for our clients in Europe and UAE and all that stuff as well. So I wanted to know, how do you tackle this kind of an issue with SEO hacking and content bombardment happening and non-AI driven content as well? So how do you guys tackle this issue?
That's a great question. I think there is a ton of content out there in the web, and it may seem like a silly answer, but content is still king, and quality content is always going to win over just some blog or website that's just cranking out tons and tons of content just to do it. So I think it all goes back to the quality of your content. If Google is always going to look for the best possible answer to serve up in that search engine results page, AI can certainly help with that. I think you can use AI for your content creation, but at the end of the day, it's still all about the most relevant and best answer to whatever question somebody's searching. It doesn't matter if it's AI written or human written, it's just all about the quality. So I think it's just quality over quantity.
Dave said it exactly right. We've seen people try to almost over-rely on SEO in some scenarios where you might say, marketing tips for the UK, for instance, or marketing tips for India, or marketing tips for the US. And at the end of the day, if those tips are still the same and you're only putting the location in there to trigger an SEO filter, it's not different enough content that it's maybe worth your time to produce.
Yeah, and we've actually had this conversation quite a bit recently, and it's worth noting too that we've seen folks doing this internally, right? Like cranking out a lot of keyword-driven content either via AI with very slight changes or other strategies of bombardment like that. But the other piece too is external content that people are cranking out to stack backlinks. One of the first things that we do with any of our SEO clients is go through and evaluate toxic backlinking. And Google, SEMrush, all of the leading technology on that is, like Dave said, usually pretty good at picking out the quality of linking sites. So we do find that we're able to weed a fair amount of it out pretty quickly, and obviously, as you may know already, toxic backlinking actually hurts your score. So we want to make sure that our, any client that we're working with on SEO, we're optimizing that first, because you might not even know that you have it. I mean, we've had linkbacks to images, from blog posts before that were coming from who knows where that we had to disavow manually. So that's a great question, and I don't suspect it's going to be anything other than an ongoing battle. Yeah. Yeah.
Essentially have something with a high VA score.
Yeah. Now, I think that the AI is going to change that too, and I suspect we'll probably talk about that a little bit more in some of these other questions. Thank you. I really appreciate that question, though. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Jessica. I own a small business. It's intimate design and content marketing. My question is, for a small business, how do you, I won't say fight, but how do you beat the algorithm in Instagram and try to find your target audience? Do you think email marketing helps as well with that?
That's a great question. On the Instagram side of things, you used to be able to get a lot of attention by kind of hashtag spamming your caption. That's certainly not as much of a case anymore. If you are using hashtags, you should be making sure they're providing value, right? And they're things that people would be searching. If they're looking for you, it's not just Happy Monday. That's kind of a useless hashtag. People looking for that aren't necessarily looking for you and your brand. So I think it's about, again, just really focusing on kind of telling your story as much as you can in that medium and using your caption to tell that story a little bit, because it can still find its way into Explore if you're telling it a little bit about who you are.
On the email marketing side, I really think any tactic where you are telling your message and your story to people that you think are qualified is going to be beneficial for you. So if you have an email list that you think are people that would engage with your business, then absolutely email marketing we've seen success with. It's just all about that list and the people that you're reaching out to and making sure that you're giving them that information that they need.
Yeah, those folks that you have in your CRM system or wherever you're collecting people, that's gold, right? So that's all that first-party data that you own. They've opted in at some point on your website or somewhere. So just continuing that message, pushing them down the marketing funnel is super important. So I would definitely advocate for email marketing, even just something as simple as a simple email journey, just like a welcome message, and then you can automate it to have kind of 2 different steps after that, just to keep them in touch and keep your brand top of mind is it's a great thing to do.
I just have a quick question. So I work for a small company, and I was wondering how I would report in the process of making, like on the social medias. Like we have weekly meetings at our place of work. So how would I report that to my boss? Because as much as I post, she's gonna want to know like, what does this mean for us? And yeah, it's very.
Yeah, absolutely. We like to always say that the best benchmarks out there in terms of performance are the ones you set for yourself. So I would take a look at, if you're doing it weekly, how many impressions you got last week, what your engagement rate was last week, or how many likes and comments and shares you got compared to the week before, because where you can show growth there, or where you can kind of see those trends and say, okay, Reels are getting a lot of engagement, static posts aren't. If we talk about subject A, that's doing a little bit better than subject B, and kind of see those themes there and adjust your content strategy accordingly. Anything that you can see there to like draw those insights from, and you can use to tailor your content strategy and pivot moving forward as needed.
Follower growth too, or no?
For what?
Follower growth.
Follower growth, yes. Some of the platforms are a little bit easier to grow on than others, but anything that you can show to show that you have that growth and that folks are sticking around and paying attention and seeing all the great things you have to say will certainly be helpful.
Some of what we talked about today too, about setting up things like Google Analytics on your site, you may or may not already have that. Obviously, you're going to be able to get a lot of what you need for social metrics right from the platform. But if you're able to set up things like conversion tracking with your website, you'll be able to show all that more value when it comes to your weekly meetings of social, like say Facebook, for example. We drove X number of users that were actually engaging with our website. Google can show you users that are engaging on the site, which is just another layer that shows you that end-to-end journey of not just what they're doing on social, but what they're doing on other parts of your brand as well.
Question over here.
Hi, my name's Laura Wick. I'm a communication specialist at Trinity Rep. I just had another question about the algorithm, especially TikTok. That's just the one that comes to mind right now. As we all know, the algorithm can be very finicky and changes every 5 minutes. For example, we have had more luck on TikTok, ironically, with horizontal video over vertical video because that is what they're prioritizing. I'm wondering how you guys pivot when these changes happen without feeling like you're playing a forever game of whack-a-mole, because it is something that we've been dealing with, and I think we're not the only ones.
You are sure right about the platforms and the algorithms changing every 5 minutes. It's definitely a constant struggle to stay on top of and something that we're always keeping eyes on. I think the more that you can think about the content of the video, it's a little bit easier to adjust the format here or there than it is to adjust what your themes are. So if you know that certain themes do well, pivoting the different take on it, or maybe jumping on a trend when it's appropriate, can be a good way to kind of get a little bit more ahead, because on TikTok especially, as I'm sure you know from being on there, the For You page is like based on what other content similar to that you are consuming, so it's very much geared towards your interests. I think the algorithms are always going to be a little bit of a tricky beast there, but keeping more attention on the themes will be a helpful way to move forward.
I'll dive a little bit in the weeds on how you can make that process easier for yourself too. If you find like every couple of months you need to switch the way that you're orienting a video format, or you need to change a certain piece of messaging, a lot of that stuff can be modular in a couple of different ways, especially if you're not wanting to go in and redo the whole video every time. Saving your raw assets, making sure you have those available for not just use with full editing suites, but also things like Canva tools or whatever you might be using. That way you can kind of make those changes on the fly, even if the message itself is not spent yet, but you've noticed that, hey, I put out another video 2 months ago that's this different format and this is performing a lot better. You can actually then go back and quickly change all of your other video formats to mimic that. You can even A/B test them if you want to. You could run vertical versus horizontal or what have you, but the name of the game with trying to beat that whack-a-mole is making your job as easy as possible when it comes to making those creative assets.
Yeah, I'll jump in again too, Ryan, and say that Canva is actually a great resource. As long as you shoot anything so that it can work when you're shooting that raw footage, that it can work on vertical, or it can work on horizontal, or it can work on square. Canva has a great feature in their Magic Studio, if you're a premium user, that's called Magic Resize. You can just click a button basically and it will swap the aspect ratio to whatever you want, and you might need to like shift some elements a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, but it's a pretty seamless swap compared to having to recreate it from scratch.
Yeah.
So I'm going to back out of the practical stuff that I'm hearing, and I'm going to put on a Ryan hat. I'm going to be a persona here. So I'm Miss Moneybags with no money in it. And I'm a small company just started, so minimal resources across the board, people, process, People, process, money, something like that, right? So do I now take my limited resources and focus on one thing? And if so, what should that be? Or do I spread it out in big wide net and try and cover as much as possible, a little bit at a time, but across the board? Can someone help me decide what I should do with my company to gain some visibility, no matter what it is?
That is the question, isn't it? That's really the big one. Really, I think most of us are probably going to say the same thing on this one. You want to identify your low-hanging fruit first, your opportunities where your audience is and they are interacting with content of any form, rather than try and blast out everywhere and hope that some of it catches. The latter is great if you're able to fund it, and there's definitely strategies that call for, wide net strategy. But in an instance where you've got limited resources and you really want to focus on, okay, I have to show results for what I am doing, even if I'm only doing a little bit, you're going to want to identify where your audience is, put a strategy in place there first. And then if that's showing enough success to where you feel you can justify broadening out your expenditure into other channels, that would be the time I think you can make the case to yourself or anybody else that might be working with you on that. I don't know if you guys have other things to add to that too.
Yeah, I think we didn't get into the whole paid versus organic side of things, but I would say focus on your organic efforts. Like SEO is basically, it's free. It takes resources, but you can create your own content and get your website set up in the best way possible to rank, to start showing a little bit of an uptick. It does take time, so there is the kind of the tortoise and the hare, where SEO is kind of the longer term strategy, but it will work for you in the background when you set aside time to do it once, and it will work for you. Paid search is another way where you can get right to the top of the search engine results page, and that obviously takes a little bit of money on ad spend, but you can focus on some of your organic efforts, organic social and search engine optimization, to start showing a little bit of an uptick.
So it's a dynamic question for sure, Dora.
You had to be across the room again, didn't you?
We're going to get one of those NFL dollies with the mic on it going over the ceiling for the next one.
Me again. I've been seeing a whole host of changes, even with the privacy policies and everybody being compliant with GDPR and all sorts of compliances that have come into place. So one of the big challenges that we always face with any of our campaigns is the ask not to track feature that has been there on the on iPhones and on all these new platforms as well, right? So how does this affect trackability in your current scenario with the existing clients that you have? And can you provide any insight or any suggestion for people who want to be able to get some relevant data and good quality data, good quality leads as well, with all these features and compliances being in place?
Yeah, I can say that this issue is definitely a hot topic in the analytics and search world. And the third-party cookies, that deprecation, so third-party cookies are going away. About 50% of the internet right now is cookieless. So like what you're saying about all these security protocols and ad personalization, it all goes back to that third-party deprecation. I think the most important part and the steps that we're taking right now with our clients is just education on the value and importance of first-party data. So collecting people who are actively submitting their information onto your website, whether it's through a lead generation form or a white paper or something like that, that list of people can be used in so many different ways. You can retarget people, you can use it for remarketing on social, on search, on display. So it does really, it is affecting us. It's definitely skewing the results in Google Analytics. It's making tracking less reliable. GA4 has a lot of these different features that are meant to fill the gaps with like using AI modeling to not guess, but make educated kind of guesses on like how the data should look, because there is a lot of people who opt out of those privacy features. So it is trying to fill in the gaps as best as possible. But it is definitely a hot button issue, and really we just advocate for the collection of first-party data and making sure that that is organized and best utilized in your CRM system or wherever you happen to be collecting that information, so that you can use it for tons of different things in marketing in the future. Yeah, exactly. It makes our lives a little bit tough.
Can I put that on a t-shirt? That's a great saying. I know we're talking predominantly about our digital tactics here too, but there are other opportunities for interest-based and really heavily targeted demographic-based media that our media team works with on quite frequently as well too. So not relying solely on third-party cookies or tracking that requires third-party cookies for value, working with vendors that buy dedicated space based on interest and demographic data that they have. And then, yeah, the first-party data thing is just, I know it's a manual process, and we haven't been doing it with certain industries for many years in some cases, but that's going to be the way of the future, I think, is going to be, yeah, that's the way it goes. But definitely, be sure to evaluate other opportunities in addition to things like your Search Social with dedicated vendors that have this kind of data available and accrue this data. We do have time for about one more if anybody's got any others. We've got a lot of great conversations going on in here. All right, sold. Well, thank you guys so much for coming out. I know this blew by for us. I'm sure it probably did for you too. I hope you guys were able to glean some value from what we talked about here today. We certainly hope this is not going to be our last time standing up here and talking with you all. So thank you again for coming out. If you have not yet done so, please grab some food. Make sure you grab your drinks on the way out. And a couple of us will be hanging around too if you want to come and chat with us for a little bit. We do have the room for a little bit longer. So again, thank you guys so much for coming out tonight.